Welcome to another Contending for the Nation podcast. We're so glad you could join with us. We have a very important general election coming up November 5th. Have you registered to vote yet? Are you informed about the candidates? We're going to take time to not just look at what they say, but what they have done and what they are doing right now.
As darkness permeates our nation, seeking to erase our godly heritage, we resist the lies and censorship, and we passionately pursue truth and the one who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." You're watching Contending for the Nation with Mark Anderson.
So glad you can join with us for another Contending for the Nation podcast. This is probably one of the most crucial podcasts we've done. And we're going to talk about the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, what their policies are about. What will America look like come November 6th? Will there be great despair, hopelessness, or will there be shouting and rejoicing that something is about to happen great in this country? Has a lot to do with what we, the voters who have this God-given right, say in this upcoming election. Don't complain if you don't vote. 30 million Christians did not vote in the last election. We could have a wonderful nation if Christians would just rise up and do their part with their God-given right to vote. And say, well, I don't like either candidates. Well, then sometimes what you need to do is vote for the lesser of two evils. Which one will direct our country in a better way, even if you don't like that candidate? Scripture in the Bible, Proverbs 22 verse 3 says this: "A prudent man foresees evil, hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." Do we want to be punished in the United States? Or would we rather have a country of our liking and get back to what this country was founded on, especially with what our early founders, who were strong believers and followers of Jesus, founded this country to be, a country for religious freedom. So, look at this. We have Charles Finney. He was in the mid-1800s. He brought about the Second Great Awakening. God used him tremendously. But here's what he said regarding politics back in those days. "The time has come that Christians must vote for honest men to take consistent ground in politics. Christians have been exceedingly guilty in this matter, but the time has come when we must act differently. Christians seem to act as if they thought God did not see what they do in politics, but I tell you, He does see it. And He will bless or curse this nation according to the course they, the Christians, take in politics." Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." People, this is a time to get knowledge, not just spiritually, but also in the natural realm. Like, who are the candidates? What do they run? Don't just go by what they say. Go by their actions. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to draw the line there and show you what each candidate stands for and what they've done through their different policies. So please share this with your friends. You can subscribe to our Rumble Contending for the Nation channel, also our Telegram channel, Contending for the Nation, or just go to our website, markandersonministries.com. But share this with friends. This is crucial for the future of our nation. We can't go sleepwalking into the future, or we could be a country that's gives place to communism, where a lot of our rights are going to be stripped away. So let's dig into some of the issues and where each candidate stands. One issue that's very near and dear to Christians and conservatives is, where do they stand with abortion? When President Trump was in office, he appointed 3 conservative constitutional judges that are very strong pro-life. And in the process, they ended up overturning Roe versus Wade and turning the abortion issue back over to the states, so that each state will have to make its decision where they stand with abortion. This should not be a federal issue. Where does Kamala Harris stand as far as the abortion goes? She's a very big promoter of abortion, pro-choice, even partial birth abortion. Many of the governors have even talked about allowing babies to be born and then comfort them, and then if parents don't want them, they can put them to death. Partial birth abortion. Is that somebody you would want to support? Just look at her stand for abortion and how that's one of the main things she's standing for. Let's look at something else that's very important here in the United States. Is under President Trump, we had no wars. A lot of people, especially in Europe, were saying, oh, you can't let him get elected. What will he do with the nuclear codes? We had peace, no wars. Took out al-Baghdadi from ISIS, also General Soleimani from Iran when there was threats there. And we showed peace through strength. What's happened under the Biden-Harris administration? Immediately, America got involved in 2 wars. We're spending billions and billions of dollars on Ukraine and Russia, the war over there. And yet, the Biden administration had the opportunity to bring peace to that situation, but they allowed and helped escalate the war instead by the actions they took. Testimony before Congress is that we had the U.S. funded biochemical weapons labs right there in Ukraine on the Russian border. Don't you think that might have been a threat to President Putin? I don't agree with either side in what they've done. It could have been done peacefully, but instead you're talking thousands and thousands of people dying on both sides because of this war being escalated. What about Israel and the Palestinians and how that's got out of hand? We're on the brink of World War III if we're not careful. And yet our enemies have looked at these things and they've taken advantage of the weakness of the Biden-Harris administration. Look how we withdrew from Afghanistan. President Trump had been very stern with the Taliban and letting them know that we had eyes on them, and they backed off. We were at peace. Things were peaceful. We weren't losing any soldiers. And he had talked about withdrawing from Afghanistan. But Biden-Harris, they withdrew in a very shameful, weak, cowardly way. They left our high-end military weapons behind so that China, Russia, the Taliban could grab a hold of those weapons and maybe someday turn and use them against us. We also, if you look at some of the things that happened behind the scenes, Kenneth Copeland had a lot of planes that he allowed David Barton and Glenn Beck to go over there and rescue people that had helped our troops, Christians, U.S. citizens. And at first they were successful, and then the State Department under Biden got wind of this, and they quickly shut it down, and leaving behind many people that were later put to death or running for their lives. This is the weakness. The suicide bomber. Our military had eyes on that suicide bomber and could have taken him out. Instead, they allowed him to blow himself up and kill 13 of our soldiers. Talk about weakness. Countries look at that and they say, let's take advantage of them. Under President Trump, you could say we had peace through strength. We were strong in that way. And also another thing to consider is how strong President Trump was against China. He stood very strongly against China, and China knew they couldn't pull anything over on Trump. But yet you take Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and it's all been exposed, brought out before Congress, that they had shell companies and ended up with millions and millions of dollars from Ukraine and also from the Chinese Communist Party. And yet they're not being held accountable because of just the way the lawfare that's going on in our country. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Remember a couple years ago how China sent a spy balloon. It came into Montana and then went over our military bases and was allowed to freely pass through our country. And then finally it got out and went off the East Coast into the Atlantic. And then the Biden administration shoots it down, more like an image thing to say, hey, look at us. We shot this spy balloon down. Not after they recovered all kinds of valuable information from our military bases. Do you think that kind of stuff would have been allowed under President Trump? These are things to consider as we choose our next leader. Do we want peace through strength, or do we want compromise and weakness? Another issue is, where do the candidates stand as far as the transgender and LGBTQ agenda that's being forced on our public schools and into our society as well? President Trump stood very strongly against this kind of agenda, and whereas the Biden-Harris, they've not just promoted it, it's almost like they're forcing it on America. Look at our public schools. Here in Cody, Wyoming, it's a conservative town, but yet our middle school library is loaded with teaching our children how they can have sex, male with male, female with female, how they can just understand more about what it is to be a transgender, what it is to be a bisexual, things like this. And it's promoted. And even as parents have risen up to try to stand against this agenda all over America, the Biden-Harris administration has labeled these people as domestic terrorists. He's been sending the DOJ and the FBI targeting these parents. Rather than going after the real terrorist, he's going after people that stand against having their children indoctrinated with these kind of things. Governor Walz, his nickname is Tampon Tim because he has made law in the public schools in Minnesota to put tampons in the men's restroom. A big promoter of the transgender and LGBTQ lifestyle. And You think about this and where it's going. I mean, Jonathan Cahn has an excellent book out that just came out recently called The Return of the Gods. There's a god called Ishtar. And Ishtar, a big part of Ishtar is prostitution, transgenderism, LGBTQ. All of those things are being revived right here in America and being promoted in our public schools. And it's also mixed a lot with Satanism and witchcraft, if you look at that. They go hand in hand. We did a whole podcast called Woke School Boards. Check it out. In that podcast, we also had video footage of the San Francisco Gay Choir singing how we are coming for your children and you're not going to be able to stop us. Well, their words are true. They've come for the children. And where do parents stand? Where do the candidates stand? I mean, this is very important that we understand this. The first transgender ever appointed to a Secretary of Health, you could say, is Assistant Secretary of Health Rachel Levine, actually a man dressed in woman's clothing, used to be the Secretary of Health for the state of Pennsylvania. But they are promoting these kind of things in the Biden-Harris administration. There's been a number of trans people that have come into the White House and they've promoted that. It's not gone over good with the American public. And I would seriously consider this because, like I say, so much of this is mixed with Satanism, witchcraft, the sex slave trade, and so many other things. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but look where the candidates stand on these issues.
Just in, Medicaid data shows 97 underage girls had their breasts completely removed. 14 underage girls underwent hysterectomies, sex change operations attempting to make young boys into girls. Penis amputations. Sound weird? Disgusting? It is, and you're paying for it. Kamala Harris supports these taxpayer-funded sex change operations. A vote for Harris. A vote for medical experiments on kids.
This is something very important to consider. President Trump, when he was in office, was probably the most pro-Christian or Christian-friendly president of my lifetime. He stood behind Christians. During the COVID times when many of the Democrat governors were shutting their states down and allowing certain things like strip joints, alcohol stores, and other places to be open, but yet were very firm on making sure the churches stayed shut down during COVID. President Trump stood up for the churches and said it's their constitutional right to be open. Also, one of the things that President Trump did when he came into power, he immediately signed an executive order wiping away the Johnson Amendment. That was Lyndon Johnson, a congressman back in the 50s, very anti-God, anti-Christian, who later became a president of the United States and really deceptively started the Vietnam War by some of the things he did. One of the things he wanted to do is shut down Christianity and shut down the voice of Christians to take away their nonprofit status. President Trump saw how important this was, and he immediately with an executive order, did away with the Johnson Amendment, giving churches the right to speak up against, speak up for government, speak up for politics, and not have their voices silenced. So who would you rather have in office? Somebody that's very Christian friendly? I want to tell you, the Biden-Harris administration has been one of the most anti-Christian, anti-God administrations to take office. And they've stood and they've gone after and targeted many Christians and many conservatives. So this is something very important to consider. Another thing to seriously consider is, how are you doing financially these days? How is the economy doing these days? Was the economy under President Trump? Under President Trump, some of the lowest inflation rates, some of the lowest unemployment numbers until COVID hit. But since Biden-Harris took office, we've had some of the highest inflation in this country. Take a look at what was the price of gas when President Trump was leaving office versus what is the price of gas at this present time. Notice how the prices right before the election are starting to go down a little bit. A lot of politicians like to play those kind of games. But an average price of gas under the Biden-Harris administration is almost double what we were paying for under President Trump. What about a carton of eggs, milk, regular groceries? Inflation has gone out of hand. I sometimes go shopping with my wife, and she's always bringing my attention to how prices have skyrocketed just in the last few years in the grocery store, making it very difficult on a lot of families. So this is something to seriously consider. Who is a better one to handle the economy? This is huge, our southern border. When considering who will be the president of the United States come next year, we need to take a look at our southern border. It's a mess right now. The flow of illegals, they say over 20 million illegals have come in since Biden-Harris took office 3.5 years ago. Under President Trump, he did his best to shut down our southern border and also stop a sex slave trade. He probably did the most as far as to shut down the sex slave trade. But the whole way he met with tremendous opposition from the Democrats. Since Biden-Harris have taken office, Kamala Harris became what's called the border czar. She's in charge of the southern border. And like I say, 20 million illegals or more have already come through our southern border. Sex slave trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and most of it comes through our southern border. And it's at an all-time high under Biden-Harris administration. Right now, they say 325,000 children have gone missing that have come across the southern border. Where are they? Many of them are in the sex slave trade. And some of them say, well, it's not compassion to shut down our southern border. Is that true? Think about all the people that have been kidnapped, all of the children that are coming through and forced into sex slave trade. And yet it's not compassion? I tell you, it is compassion to shut down and have legal immigration. That should be the law of this land. But yet, the country's being overwhelmed. Right now, you think about Springfield, Ohio. That's just one that's been in the headlines lately, and you won't catch much of it on the mainstream media. But here's a town where they bust up, or they brought in 20,000 Haitian refugees into a city. I think maybe 60,000. Don't quote me on that. But that's overwhelmed their population. There's traffic jams. There's many traffic accidents. There's raping. There's violence. They've heard of cats being eaten. It's true. These kind of things are happening. And it's become such a problem in that city that the police have gone on radio silence. Much of the things have been silenced and censored coming out of Springfield, Ohio. Ohio is a swing state. One of the things that the Biden administration is doing, as the people are coming across the southern border, there's places where as they're coming across the border, they get information. One of the information they get is vote for Biden-Harris. And that's illegal, for illegals to vote. But they're pushing, the Democrats are doing everything to push for cheating in this upcoming election by having these millions of illegals voting in our upcoming election. Look at the increase in rape and murder with those who have come across our southern border. That's also become very high. Right now, Venezuela has been emptying many of its prisons and sending up a lot of their gangs and their prisoners. At the Denver's, or a suburb of Denver, Aurora, Colorado, is a perfect example where Venezuelan drug lords, and not just drug lords, but also just gangs, have come through, and they've been set up in certain neighborhoods. They're taking over those neighborhoods. And how do they get a hold of guns and weapons? Think about this. Kamala, she flip-flops on a lot of issues. One of the things, she's the border czar, keep this in mind. So she's in charge of the border. She's saying when she comes into office as president, she's going to take charge of the southern border and shut down a lot of this illegal immigration. She's only saying that to get votes, people. She has every bit, she can be doing that right now, and there is no changes at our southern border. They are coming through by the hundreds of thousands. And why doesn't she do something right now? Don't go by what they say. Go by what they're doing, their actions. Here's the latest from a deputy director stating of non-detained citizens, convicted criminals that have come through our southern border. The count is right now 425,431. Those convicted of homicide, the latest, 13,099 have been allowed across our southern border. Convicted of sexual assault, 15,811. And who's this coming? This is coming from Patrick, don't butcher his name, but he's the ICE Deputy Director. And these statistics, they don't lie. This is a serious thing to consider. Who do you want running our southern border? A few other things regarding our southern border. The Biden-Harris administration pump out millions of dollars to so-called Christian charities that are set up at the southern border. Many of those Christian charities are fronts, and they're helping with the sex slave trade that is coming across our southern border. Be careful who you're investing in and supporting, because there's tremendous deception going on down there. We did a podcast last year called The Sound of Freedom. You can find it on our Rumble, Contending for the Nation channel, also at markandersonministries.com. But it really talks about what's happening at our southern border. A lot of things were exposed when that movie with Jim Caviezel playing Timothy Ballard, a true story of somebody who's had to rescue many children. This movie played last year, and it was tremendous opposition to this movie being released. It should have been released years ago, but they finally released it last year. It was the #1 bestseller in the summertime, and it exposed so much. Please check out our podcast on that, because a lot of information is there in what's happening on our southern border. So who are some of the main ones that are coming across our southern border? As they take note of the ones that are coming across our border, the majority are Chinese men of military age. What do you think they're doing coming into our country? In recent months, there's been 2 assassination attempts on President Trump. And thank God for angelic protection and keeping him safe. He was within a quarter of an inch on July 13th of being killed. God divinely protected him. We did a podcast on that called 47, When History Repeats Itself. Check that podcast out. You'll just see the hand of God all over the protection on President Trump that particular day. But just in recent developments, word has come out from Congress members and from some whistleblowers in law enforcement that there are 5 to 10 assassin teams here in the United States right now that want to take out President Trump. President Trump has asked for more security so that he can be protected better. He recently was in Wisconsin. The Biden-Harris administration denied that extra security. He was forced from doing a rally where he would have had 50,000 people in attendance to going into a theater hall with only 750 people. You can better believe the media probably will play on that one, saying his audiences are diminishing and going down now. But I want you to think about what's going on. There's a lot of lawfare that's going on. And then there's a lot of rhetoric. The Biden administration and a number of people in the media and are calling President Trump like Adolf Hitler. No proof behind it. In fact, it's the farthest thing from a lie. I've got friends in Europe that are saying, how could you vote for a guy like this? He reminds me of Adolf Hitler. And yet, where are they getting this information from? They're getting it from the Biden administration. They're getting it from our mainstream media. I recently heard a leading evangelist. He was interviewing a leading general here in our nation one time, just interviewing him. And he said, what's the number one cause of war? And this general said one word: media. It's our mainstream media that is our propaganda machine, and that's what's happening. They're spreading lies about President Trump. The closest thing to an Adolf Hitler is what's going on with the Biden-Harris administration, the heavy censorship, the lawfare, these different things. Eric Metaxas is a New York Times best-selling author. He's the one that wrote the great book on Bonhoeffer. Recently did a book called A Letter to the American Church, where he spells out what's going on in our country right now is exactly what took place and how Adolf Hitler set himself up. And yet, part of the lies is they'll call Trump the Adolf Hitler when actually they're the ones, the propaganda machine set up, the mainstream media, they got them behind them. They've got DOJ, FBI, CIA, doing their dirty work. A lot of the CIA and FBI and DOJ, the Secret Service, they've had knowledge of assassination attempts on President Trump, but they don't let it be revealed. They don't even let President Trump know about it. And yet they will not give him extra security. So this is something we really need to pray about, because never in the history of our country has somebody in office gone after their political opponent in such a way as to try to get him assassinated. There's actually 30% of the Democrats in this nation, there's a poll taken, they would love to see President Trump assassinated. Where have we ever had that kind of hatred and rhetoric before? You'll never see that amongst the Republicans calling for that. You take a look at President Trump. He's 77 years old, never had a felony charge against him his entire life, but he decided to run for office again in the last year. Now, in this year, there's been 90 felony charges they're trying to pin on him so they can lock him away and put him in prison. But keeps going through court cases, and all of these things just kind of drop by the wayside. None of them are sticking. But why would they go after him? It's called election interference. They do not want him to run for president. They are so fearful. Deputy Secretary of Commerce, just in the last week, was calling for Trump to be extinguished. Where do you hear rhetoric like that from any former presidential administration? This is the things that needs to stop. So we need to really pray for President Trump, and think about this. If Harris was to come into office, what would happen to her political enemies? Just take a look at what's happening right now. Which presidential candidate would you want running our country if we were to have another pandemic? Look at what happened during COVID. I can't say I agree with everything President Trump did at that time, but I'll tell you one thing about him. He never forced vaccines on anyone. Rolled it out way too quickly, unproven vaccines that caused tremendous damage, even death. And then you take a look, though, at the Biden-Harris administration, how they continued, and the heavy censorship that was taking place if you didn't really speak up and follow what they had, how they paid off the major news networks billions of dollars to run with misinformation about COVID and vaccines and how they were safe. And the heavy-handedness, just as far as pushing the vaccine and taking the vaccine despite all the death, all the maiming that took place. Think about those kind of things. Who would you want running this country? Under the Biden-Harris administration and many of the Democrat governors, they wanted to keep the churches shut down, but yet the strip joints could stay open. The drug and alcohol places where you could get drugs and alcohol kept that open. The main, some of the big chain stores, they were allowed to be kept open during COVID, but then you had a lot of the small business, family businesses that were run for decades and decades, ended up having to permanently shut down. And take a look at what happened in COVID with when George Floyd was killed. The misinformation that came out of Minneapolis, how Governor Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, allowed the city of Minneapolis literally burnt to the ground. I used to live there. That's where I started in ministry. I went back and visited afterwards, and I just couldn't believe the devastation. Millions and millions of dollars of devastation. But during that time, you had the Black Lives Matter protesters, and they were burning buildings. They were causing all kinds of destruction and harm. And yet, when some of them would be arrested, who was the one standing by, defending them and getting them released on bail? Kamala Harris. Are these the two you'd want running our country that allowed Antifa to flourish, BLM to flourish? And yet, when it came to true justice, many of those were either put in prison or they were censored heavily. So think about this. During the Biden-Harris administration during COVID, there also Biden put together a lady who was a radical leftist who was the czar of misinformation. That did not fly very well with the American public, and within a couple months, she was forced to resign as well. But who would you want running the country if there was another pandemic taking place? Also, on a side note, we put together a podcast called Smoke Screens and the Great Awakening. We showed just the things that were allowed to take place with the forced vaccines, also the money that Pfizer made, the dishonesty and much of the corruption, the money, just follow the money. It wasn't about the science, it was all about the money. And science was definitely compromised during the pandemic, and a lot of it came out of the Biden-Harris administration and the Democrats who were forcing a lot of this agenda down the throats of Americans. Let's look at the candidates as far as they stand with our police departments, ICE agents, the military. President Trump has always been, you could say, always stood behind law enforcement, behind the police departments, behind ICE, also behind our military. Whereas you look at the Biden-Harris administration, and Kamala's talked about defunding the police, talking about defunding ICE agents. Look at the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I would ask the military, I would ask people in police departments, I would ask people in charge of border security? Which candidate do they stand behind? Another thing is President Trump has always been pro-Second Amendment in passing good gun legislation, whereas Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have tried to do away a number of times with gun rights. And notice most of the time it comes out, they don't let a good crisis go to waste. So if there's a school shooting, immediately they'll come out and try to pass gun legislation, which always fails. But the last several school shootings have been done by transgender. They don't talk anything about the mental illness. They don't talk anything about the effects that have taken place when children go through transitions of sex change surgeries and puberty blockers and things like that. But it has caused tremendous mental anguish and harm to the point that a number of these shooters were transgender. But you'll never hear that in the mainstream media. And you always hear about, let's do away with the guns. And think about that. What happened in communist China? You take away the guns, and what happens? Under Mao, the people were massacred. And thank God that we have gun rights in this nation that were established by our early founders. And yes, there are some things that we need to deal with. Mental illness. There are things that we can do better. But for the most part, I would stand behind President Trump and the way he stands for our Second Amendment rights. Another thing to look at is which candidate is the closest to equal justice as far as treating those with differing views with justice. Just take a look at the two candidates and look at also the lawfare that's taking place. What is lawfare? Let me just read this here to you. Lawfare is the use of legal systems and institutions to damage or delegitimize an opponent or to deter an individual's usage of their legal rights. The term may refer to the use of legal systems and principles against an enemy, such as by damaging or delegitimizing them, wasting their time and money. Example, strategic lawsuits against public participation, or winning a public relations victory. I want to tell you what we've seen under the Biden-Harris administration towards President Trump. I've never seen lawfare to this extent. In fact, I didn't even know much about the term lawfare until this year when the way they've gone after President Trump, and not just President Trump. Look at it as an example of what happened on January 6th in 2021. President Trump called for peaceful protest. The media totally ran with the Democrats' talking point. And also there was plants from the FBI, many plants from the FBI, stirring up the crowd, inviting him into the Capitol, and then you ended up with all kinds of arrests. They've arrested grandmas and grandpas. There's one lady who was interviewed. All she did is go in there and pray in tongues, an intercessor. She was praying in tongues, and they wanted to put her behind bars for years. I don't know what came of her court case, but talk about lawfare. There was a Blaze journalist who was there. All he was there for is to report on what was happening. And he had such damning evidence against the Biden-Harris administration and against the Democrats and the January 6th committee, including one of our own Wyoming Rhino, Liz Cheney, who we made sure to vote out of office. Such damning evidence to show how they were lying and spinning lies and video proof of what really took place. And they were, this January 6th committee, mostly Democrats, put together by Pelosi, they were picking and choosing videos that they wanted to make it look so bad, like it's the worst thing that's ever happened in our country. Worse, like Kamala Harris said, this is worse than Pearl Harbor. I mean, this is how they exaggerated and ran with this to put many conservatives and Christians in prison, and to this day they're still serving. They haven't been treated right. And look at lawfare, how they've gone after some of their political opponents. Steve Bannon was an advisor to President Trump. He never did anything wrong, but he did have the most popular podcast, probably almost in the world, Steve Bannon's War Room, and he was exposing so many things. Well, they went after him recently on bogus charges and put him away. And he will be released shortly after the November 5th elections. But in order to silence his voice, put him away. Same with this Blaze journalist who was reporting on what was happening on January 6th. He had damning evidence to show what was the truth, and they locked him away. He did nothing wrong other than he was reporting, but he wasn't reporting what they wanted to. You've got a lady like Tina Peters, who we've supported over in Grand Junction, clerk of the district court, and in charge of elections in 2020. She's a Gold Star mom, lost a son who was fighting for America here he was fighting in the Middle East, and wonderful mother. Well, what happens is there's many, the FBI has become politicized, and where early morning hours, they knock down her door, they arrest her, put her in chains, shame her, and they've lied and lied about her. And a lot of it has to do with the Secretary of State of Colorado, Jenna Griswold, who is a George Soros-funded Secretary of State. The lawfare that's going on in our country. There's been many other people I know. I have friends. I won't tell you their name, but I have friends. The FBI busted down their door in the wee hours of the morning. They were still getting up and put them in handcuffs and interrogated them heavy for a couple hours, then found out, oh, wrong people, no apology, and then left. And yet this is the kind of stuff that's going on. It's not equal justice under Biden-Harris administration. And you can imagine if she was to take office, what would happen to her political opponents? Just look at the way they've treated President Trump. And notice what's happening. As they go after him with lawfare like we've never seen in this country, he rises in the polls to the point that he's leading in all the polls. And this is the kind of stuff that happens. The American people can see through these lies. And, you know, the biggest ones to run with this story is our mainstream media. They are a propaganda machine for the Democrat Party. Another thing to really consider in this upcoming elections, do we have free and fair elections? Most of our country does not believe we have free and fair elections. The Democrats, before the 2020 election, were sounding the alarm that the election machines could be hacked into and that they were connected to the internet. Well, then 2020 election takes place, and the results turned out in favor of the Democrats, and you hear nothing about that anymore. All of a sudden, forget those talking points. And then when you go to try to talk about those kind of things, like the Dominion machines, software machines, and huge connection to Venezuela and the CCP, how were those machines connected to the internet? No, they were not connected to the internet. And yes, there's proof that they were. And then you've got so much proof out there showing how that the 2020 elections were not fair. I don't think this ever happened in the history of America where the elections weren't called the night of the day of elections. But what happened in the 2020 election, you've got Trump leading. It looks like he easily was going to coast to victory. But then all of a sudden, in 6 swing states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, the elections were stopped in the middle of the night. You could say they were stopped and, we'll get back to counting in the morning. And then all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and everything was changed in Biden's favor. There was 6 or 7 counties in those 6 states that literally flipped the election in the favor of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And there was so much proof and video footage. A mailman in charge of mail in one place in Pennsylvania watched a huge truck come in, and it was loaded with ballots from another state brought in to flip the election there in Pennsylvania. And then what happened when he blew the whistle on that? The FBI went after him to silence him and threaten him. What happened in Michigan? People have video footage in the middle of the night. Well, first of all, the Democrats kicked out all the Republican poll watchers. They put up a cardboard or something to block the view of the counting, and then shut down for that night. And then all of a sudden, you've got in the middle of the night van loads of ballots coming in, and the next morning Biden had won the election because of what happened in Detroit. Then you've got same thing in Wisconsin. You also have Fulton County in Georgia, near the Atlanta area. All of a sudden, they said, oh, pipes have blown in our toilets, there's something going on, and they stopped the election. And video footage of them bringing in all kinds of extra ballots. And the next morning, Biden had won that state. And similar things happened in Arizona, Nevada. The proof is out there. But yet, when they tried to go, because of just the hijacking of many of our courts and the legal system, nobody wanted to hear that. Everybody said, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. No, there's too much proof out. Dinesh D'Souza had an excellent movie out called 2,000 Mules. And why did Google censor that? Why did our mainstream media censor it? Why did Snopes and Wikipedia, all run by leftists, try to shut that movie down and try to discredit it? It's because it had too much damning evidence to show how ballot harvesting was going on at many of the drop boxes. They were all filmed, and yet, oh no, that never happened. These are the kind of things happening. One guy that's a real fighter for free and fair elections is Mike Lindell. You can go to his channel, Frank Speech, or I should say his television station, Frank Speech, and so much of the proof is there showing how that Trump actually won the 2020 election, and it wasn't even close. And then you also have 2022, similar things happen. But what's happening is a lot of people are being raised up and really standing against election fraud and interference. The Democrats have used all kinds of things like dead people to vote. You've got, like I said before, they're coming across the southern border by the millions, and they're told, you can go ahead and vote for Biden-Harris. And these are the ways that they're trying to, they can't win on their own merit, so why, this is why they have election interference. Last thing we want to talk about, as far as a candidate goes, is fossil fuels and climate change, the Green New Deal. Where do the candidates stand on these issues and these matters? President Trump always pushed for energy independence, and that's why the gas prices were so low under his administration. And also, just the opposite from Kamala Harris. She's always pushed to end fossil fuels. She's a hardcore promoter of climate change and the Green New Deal, which would literally tax us to death and end up making it very difficult on so many Americans. And it's a socialist agenda propagated with so many lies, and the media runs with these things. And so these are things to consider as you go out to vote. We'll be back with the conclusion. Well, in conclusion, You know, an awakening is transpiring. We've got people awakening to back to righteousness, back to Christianity, back to looking to Jesus. But also there's an awakening transpiring where people no longer just trust politicians at what they say. They look and they see what are their actions, what do they stand for. And because actions speak a lot louder than the words. And that's a very good thing. We need that kind of awakening. We're going to put a voter's guide at the bottom for you to see where all the candidates stand, not just in the presidential election, but also for Senate and for Congress. So you know where your candidates stand. That's very important. The Bible does say, know those who labor amongst you. And that goes for politicians too. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance earlier this week had a debate. It turned out to be a very good debate. One thing that Tim Walz was called out on was his connections to the CCP, and he tried to walk away from that and try to say how he wasn't in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre, where 10,454 people were massacred in pro-democracy rallies. And a lot of us saw what happened there. Well, he was there. But since that time, do you realize that he's made over 30 trips to China? In fact, he speaks very highly about China and the CCP. He was a school teacher, and he was promoting that kind of government in his public schools. And if you think about that, a lot of the CCP has a lot to do with censorship. And can you imagine? I mean, we've seen heavy censorship. In fact, just today, it came out in the news that Adam Schiff, a leading senator from California, he's calling for, he's written letters to big tech to censor opposing views. In other words, he calls this a danger to democracy, so don't allow opposing views, censor those. Censorship is a big part of the CCP. Take out opposing view and you have just one line, one party, and it becomes very ugly, just like you see in China today. We're following in a lot of similarities there here in the United States. Mark Zuckerberg recently came out and said that during COVID, during 2020, 2021, in recent years, that the Biden-Harris administration, along with the DOJ and the FBI, came to them and told them to censor basically opposing thought. And he said he can't do that anymore. I'm glad he came out and he was convicted. His conscience was convicted. So we need to really think about those kind of things. Do we want heavy censorship? A lot of that happens under, there's tremendous connections between Biden with China. He and his son Hunter made millions of dollars illegally, put it into shell companies. That's all come out. You got Harris, border czar, and the main people coming across our southern border are Chinese men of military age. What's going on there? You take Tim Walz. Very strong connection to China and the CCP, and praises that kind of form of government. You know, Trump got born again in 2015. You know, and so he's not been a Christian a long time. If you look at his background, he was a pretty vile sinner. He was quite the playboy. And so a lot of things not negative things about him now that he, of course, start running for office. But I want to ask you, as a Christian, is the blood of Jesus enough to save the most vile sinner? See, a lot of people hold President Trump's past over him. You got to understand, they say he's a little crude. Well, yeah. He's not perfect. He's far from perfect. I don't agree with everything he does. I don't agree with everything he says. But is he the one that should be leading our country? Is he a commander-in-chief? We don't need a pastor-in-chief, people. We need a commander-in-chief to take control and somebody that really cares for the country. President Trump has shown how he cares. Many times when there's disasters, just like what happened on the East Coast in the last few days, President Trump was there on the scene trying to comfort people. This is his heart. He cares for his people. And yes, he is a little crude. His background reminds me of the construction workers that I used to live with. Oh, come to think of it, he was a builder. He was a construction worker, and then from New York of all places. So, just to come against him because he's a little bit crude and say, I can't stand him, I'm not going to vote for him, that's not the position we should take. Saul Alinsky. A lot of people don't know who Saul Alinsky is. He's since passed away, but he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. He was a mentor. He was Hillary Clinton's mentor. Many Democrats have really gleaned and learned a lot from Saul Alinsky. He had a book out called Rules for Radicals, in which he dedicated that book to Lucifer, the first one to rebel and gain a kingdom. One of the things he pushes for, he advocated for civil disobedience. Look at BLM, look at Antifa, and how many of these kind of even violent criminals are getting away scot-free. This is a big part of what Saul Alinsky pushed for. He also said this in his book, never let a good crisis go to waste. And if you look at that, so many crises, they've come. And I want to tell you, I watched the Democrat Party spin this and take it out of control, where you can see that they're carrying out this agenda from Saul Alinsky's book. So, a couple last things to share with you. Voting for a third party. Some people say, I don't like either candidate, I'm going to vote for a third party. I'll tell you, you vote for a third party, it's a total waste of a vote, because nobody else is going to come close. It's either going to be Kamala Harris or President Trump that is going to win this election. Why would you want to waste your vote when our country's at stake the way it is right now? To look back, from let's say decades from now, and say Harris does win, and her connections and her ties to Marxism, what if she carries out that kind of agenda like we've seen carried out in the Biden-Harris administration in recent years? What would you say to your children? How would you explain to your children you had no interest in voting when you could have made a difference for this country, all because, man, I don't like President Trump, I don't like his mean tweets? People, we have to really get the mind of the Lord. We should be doing some praying and fasting for what's coming down the road here, for the future of this country. We need to take it seriously. We need to know those who labor amongst us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with others. Go to our Rumble Contending for the Nation channel, or our Telegram Contending for the Nation channel. You can subscribe to that, and then each time we put something out, you'll be alerted. Also, you can go to markandersonministries.com. But I want to tell you, share this with people that are sitting on the fence. Share this with people that don't know, especially Christians, who should I vote for? Help them to be informed. This is important. So spread this if you would. And also consider supporting our ministry. We'll have the address down below where you can donate and help finance these kind of podcasts. They're not cheap. And so we want to continue to put this out, and we appreciate your prayers and support. And one last thing I want to say, at this time, we need to be mighty warriors. We need to rise up. We need to take seriously. God, like Finney said, that the Lord will either bless or curse this nation according to the course that we take in politics, according to the way we vote. We need to take that serious. We need to rise up in prayer. We need to speak up and get a backbone. We need to really contend for this nation at such a time as this. It's crucial, because America's at a crossroad. What will America look like come November 6th? I hope and believe that it's going to go in the right direction.
Wounded warrior, don't give up. In the fight, there will come a time you will be healed. But as for now, the battle rages on and on. Already, it's taken its toll.
In the words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We must contend for truth. If we don't contend for truth, we lose our freedom. Benjamin Franklin said those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. You've been watching Contending for the Nation with Mark Anderson. If you've enjoyed this podcast, share it with others and spread the truth. For more information about today's show and contending for freedom, go to markandersonministries.com and find the truth.